There is a level of discipline that most people never reach, not because it is impossible, because it is uncomfortable to witness. A person who no longer needs to be reminded. A person who no longer waits to feel ready. A person who does not negotiate with the task, the clock, or the weakness inside their own mind. Such a person becomes difficult to understand. Their consistency makes others uncomfortable. Because most people live according to how they feel. They work when they are motivated. They rest when they are tired. They begin when inspiration arrives. And they stop when resistance appears. But there is another way to live. A colder way. A quieter way. A way in which discipline is no longer something you perform. It becomes something you are. And when that transformation is complete, motivation becomes unnecessary. You do not need to feel inspired to breathe. You do not need to debate whether you will breathe today. The action has become part of the system. This is the final level of discipline, when you no longer need to be motivated. And to understand it, we must first destroy the identity that depends on motivation. In ancient Japan, a warrior did not become skilled by practicing only on the days he felt powerful. A swordsman did not wait for the perfect emotional state before training. The blade was sharpened because it was time to sharpen the blade. The body was trained because it was time to train the body. The discipline was not based on emotion. It was based on continuity. The river does not ask whether it feels like moving. It moves. The machine does not need inspiration to perform its function. It follows its design. And the warrior who has mastered himself does not repeatedly ask, "Do I feel like doing this?" That question has already been removed. This is the ancient principle of removing choice. Not because choice is always bad, but because excessive choice is one of the greatest enemies of consistency. Consider a man named Kenji. He is not lazy. This is what makes his problem difficult. He is intelligent. He has ambition. He has watched the lectures. He has purchased the books. He has created the schedules. He has promised himself that this time will be different. On Monday, he wakes early. He trains. He studies. He works with intensity. He feels powerful. On Tuesday, he continues. On Wednesday, resistance appears. He slept badly. His energy is lower. The weather is unpleasant. His mind begins producing arguments. Perhaps tomorrow would be better. And tomorrow sounds reasonable. That is the danger. He misses one day, then another. Then he begins again. A new schedule. A new system. A new promise. But the same identity remains. Kenji is not failing because he lacks information. He is failing because he is still allowing his emotions to participate in every decision. Every day, he holds a meeting with his weakness. And every day, weakness is given a vote. This is where the transformation begins. You must understand the first illusion. Motivation. People believe motivation is the beginning of action. They wait for the feeling to arrive. They believe discipline begins when the mind becomes excited. But motivation is unstable. It rises. It falls. It disappears. If your behavior depends on motivation, then your behavior is controlled by a temporary chemical state. You are not in control. You are waiting for permission from your emotions. And emotions are unreliable leaders. The ancient warrior understood something modern society has forgotten. You do not need to feel ready. You need to have already decided. There is a difference. Motivation says, "I will act when I feel strong." Discipline says, "I will act because the decision was made before weakness arrived." This is the first principle. Decide before the moment of resistance. The moment of resistance is not the time to make a decision. The decision must already be dead. The answer must already exist. When the hour arrives, you do not ask whether you will train. You train. When the writing session begins, you do not ask whether you feel creative. You write. When the study period arrives, you do not ask whether you are mentally prepared. You begin. The choice has been removed. And with the removal of choice, a tremendous amount of mental energy becomes available. Modern neuroscience has repeatedly shown that decision-making requires cognitive resources. The more decisions you make, the more opportunities you create for hesitation. This is why highly disciplined people often appear simple. Their lives are not controlled by endless negotiation. They have predetermined responses. The second illusion is choice. Most people believe freedom means having endless options. But endless options can become a prison. Should I train in the morning or evening? Should I study for 30 minutes or 2 hours? Should I use this method or another? Should I begin today or tomorrow? The mind creates an endless corridor of doors. And while you are choosing which door to open, time is disappearing. The solution is not more choice. The solution is structure. This is where the system begins. The system is simple. Public declaration. Fixed time. Fixed action. Practice without GAPS. Predecided RESPONSES. 5 principles. 5 pieces of machinery. Together, they create a system that gradually removes the need for motivation. The first principle is public declaration. Not for attention. Not for applause. Not for performance. A declaration creates psychological weight. You tell the world, or at least a small part of it, what you have decided to become. You say, for the next 30 days, at this fixed time, I will perform this fixed action. The declaration is not a promise of perfection. It is a statement of identity. You are no longer saying, I hope I can do this. You are saying, this is what I do. That difference is enormous. Harvard researchers have studied the power of identity and commitment in behavior. People are more likely to maintain actions that are connected to how they perceive themselves. The behavior becomes evidence. Every repetition says, this is who I am. And every failure to act says something as well. This is why public declaration must be serious. Do not declare 10 goals. Do not announce a new life every week. Choose one practice, one battlefield, one repeated action. Then make the declaration. You are not asking for permission. You are creating psychological pressure. The second principle is fixed time. The action must have a location in time. Not to, I will train later. Not to, I will write when I have time. Not to, I will study when I feel focused. Those statements are not plans. They are escape routes. A fixed time removes negotiation. At 6:00, the practice begins. At 8:00, the work begins. At 10:00, the study begins. The clock becomes the command. And when the clock gives the command, your emotions are no longer consulted. This is where behavior begins to resemble choreography. A dancer does not stop in the middle of a performance to debate the next movement. The movement has already been rehearsed. The sequence has already been decided. The body follows the structure. Your discipline must become choreography. The same time. The same beginning. The same first movement. The same environment. The same action. Again. And again. And again. The third principle is fixed action. Do not begin with a heroic goal. Begin with an unbreakable action. The objective is not to prove how much you can do. The objective is to establish continuity. If you want to write 1 page. If you want to exercise, train for a fixed minimum period. If you want to study, Complete a predetermined session. The amount can grow, but the beginning must remain stable. Why? Because the beginning is where most people die. They do not fail after 6 months. They fail at the moment of starting. The mind sees the entire mountain. The body feels the weight. The mind says, "Not today." So you make the beginning smaller. Not weaker. Smaller. A small door is still a door. A river does not carve stone with one enormous strike. It continues. Continuity creates force. The fourth principle is practice without GAPS. This is where perfection must be destroyed. Many people believe discipline means never failing. This belief creates fragile systems. They perform perfectly for 10 days. Then life interferes. They miss a day. And because perfection has been broken, they abandon the entire identity. This is foolish. A warrior who falls does not become a non-warrior. He stands. The objective is not perfection. The objective is continuity. Miss one day. Return immediately. Do not create a second gap. The first gap is an event. The second gap begins a pattern. This is the difference. One failure does not define you. Your response to failure begins to define you. The fifth principle is predecided RESPONSES. You must decide in advance what you will do when resistance appears. Because resistance will appear. There is no system without resistance. You will become tired. You will become distracted. You will become disappointed. You will question the purpose. So decide now. If I am tired, I will perform the minimum version. If I am busy, I will reduce the duration but not break the chain. If I miss a day, I return the next day without negotiation. If I feel unmotivated, I begin anyway. If I feel doubt, I follow the schedule. This is how discipline becomes automation. You are no longer trying to win a psychological war every morning. The war was decided earlier. This is what MIT researchers have explored through the study of habit formation and behavioral systems. Repeated actions in stable contexts become easier to initiate. The brain begins to recognize the environment, the time, and the sequence. The action requires less conscious resistance. This is the goal. Not to become a person who constantly fights himself. To become a person who has designed a life in which the correct action becomes the default action. The system begins as discipline. Then it becomes repetition. Then it becomes identity. Then it becomes automatic. And this is where the old version of you begins to disappear. Not dramatically. Quietly. The old identity does not die in one moment. It dies through contradiction. Every time the old you says, "Skip today," and you continue, a small piece of the old identity disappears. Every time the old you says, "You are not disciplined," and you act anyway, another piece disappears. Every time you continue without motivation, you create evidence against your former identity. You are no longer the person who waits to feel ready. You are no longer the person who needs perfect conditions. You are no longer the person who starts again every Monday. The old identity begins to starve. Because identity requires evidence, and you are providing new evidence. Day after day. The ancient samurai did not become dangerous because he possessed a special emotion. He became dangerous because repetition had removed hesitation. The movement had been practiced until the body understood before the mind. This is the same process. You repeat the action until the question disappears. Should I do it? Gone. Do I feel like it? Gone. What if I fail? Gone. The action remains. This is the final level. Not intensity. Not excitement. Not emotional power. Continuity. The machine continues. The river continues. The choreography continues. The campaign continues. And slowly, the person who once needed motivation becomes someone motivation cannot control. There is a point where discipline becomes self-sustaining. You no longer practice only because you want a result. You practice because interruption feels unnatural. The practice has become part of the architecture of your identity. You do not ask a disciplined person why they continue. That question is already strange to them. Why do you brush your teeth? Why do you breathe? Why do you exist according to the structure you have chosen? The answer is simple. Because this is what you do. This is where the transformation becomes dangerous. Because once your identity changes, returning to the old version of yourself becomes difficult. You may still feel weakness. You may still experience fear. You may still experience exhaustion. But you no longer obey every feeling. You observe the feeling. Then you continue. This is mindfulness in its most practical form. Not escaping thought. Not destroying emotion. Seeing thought clearly without allowing every thought to become a command. The mind says, "Stop." You hear it. You do not obey automatically. The mind says, "Tomorrow." You hear it. You do not obey automatically. The mind says, "You are not ready." You hear it. And you begin. This is mastery. Not the absence of resistance. The ability to move without being ruled by resistance. So now the question is not, how can I become more motivated? The question is, what can I remove from the decision-making process? Remove the unnecessary choice. Remove the endless variety. Remove the need for perfection. Remove the dependence on willpower. Remove the negotiation. Create the time. Define the action. Declare the commitment. Prepare the response. Then repeat. Without gaps. Again. And again. And again. If you are serious, make the declaration now. Not as entertainment. Not as a temporary emotional experience. Write the practice you are committing to. Write the fixed time. Write the minimum action. And then comment it publicly. Your comment is not merely a comment. It is a psychological commitment. A declaration that you are no longer interested in remaining exactly as you are. And if you want more teachings on discipline, focus, mindfulness, and the ancient systems used to master the self, subscribe to this channel. Not because subscribing will transform you. It will not. Transformation requires action. But the decision to remain close to these ideas can become part of your environment. And your environment shapes your behavior. So declare it. Then begin. The final level of discipline is not becoming a person who never feels weakness. That person does not exist. The final level is becoming a person who no longer requires strength for every action. The system carries you. The time commands you. The practice continues. The identity protects the behavior. And the behavior reinforces the identity. This is the cycle. This is the machine. This is the river. This is the choreography. You repeat until the action becomes natural. You continue until interruption becomes unnatural. You practice until the former version of yourself becomes difficult to recognize. And one day, you will look back at the person who needed motivation for everything. The person who waited. The person who negotiated. The person who promised and postponed. And you will understand something quietly terrifying. That person did not disappear because you defeated him in one dramatic battle. He disappeared because you stopped feeding him. One decision at a time. One fixed hour at a time. One repeated action at a time. One day without a gap. Then another. Then another. Until the old identity has nothing left to say. So here is the challenge. Choose one practice. Choose one fixed time. Choose one action. Declare it. Then continue when motivation disappears. Especially when motivation disappears. Because that is the moment the transformation begins. Not when you feel powerful. When you act without feeling powerful. Not when the path is easy. When the path is already decided. Not when you become a different person. When you begin behaving like the person you have decided to become. Do this long enough, and something irreversible will happen. You will no longer be normal. You will no longer require the permission of your emotions. You will no longer need to be convinced every morning. You will no longer be the person you were. The door will close behind you. Quietly. Completely. And when you turn around, you will realize that you cannot return.